El paper es work in progress, así que las voy a mezclar. So please be kind to my paper. And second, I'm not really sure how it works with reading because I'm normally not doing this, but let's try. While investigating animals bred out of putrefaction in the Silva Silvarum, Bacon emphasizes the significance of such a study. I quote, "The nature of vivification is such worth the inquiry, and as the nature of things is commonly better perceived in small than in great, and in imperfect than imperfect, and in parts than in the whole, so the nature of vivification is best inquired in creatures bred of putrefaction. The contemplation thereof has many excellent fruits. First, in disclosing the original of vivification. Secondly, in disclosing the original of figuration. Thirdly, in disclosing many things in the nature of perfect creatures, which in them lie more hidden." There are two important ideas in this quote. First, that processes or qualities of bodies are better understood when studied on simple and less perfect individuals, an idea that runs throughout Bacon's works. Second, that those creatures bred out of putrefaction are simpler than those produced out of a seed, because, as we will see further, putrefaction is the first step in the generation of the new individual, and if the process stops here, the creature will be simple, with a confused body, thus less perfect. Shortly, this is called spontaneous generation because it happens at once, while the generation out of seed requires time to create more complex beings. The question to be asked here is, if there is no seed, then how can a new individual appear? Does Bacon believe that what we now call abiogenesis is possible? Well, the aim of this paper is to show that for Bacon there is no crucial distinction between generation out of seed and out of putrefaction. And this is a consequence of rejecting the use of substantial forms in explaining the production of life. For Bacon, there are four elements needed for vivification: an enclosed spirit, heat attenuating and dilating the spirit, soft and sticky matter, and the matrix closed up for the right length of time. This is a quotation from Historia et Inquisitia Animata et Animato. These requirements are the same for beings generated out of putrefaction and those generated out of seed, in the case of plants, and generated by copulation, so out of sperm and menstruum in the case of animals. I will refer to both cases as generation out of seed, because of course sperm it was considered as a kind of seed. As I will show in this paper, and somewhat counterintuitively, Bacon seems to offer a more significant role to the tangible matter compared to the pneumatic one, an influence coming probably from Aristotle's biological writings. Tangible matter keeps the spirit in, while the spirit shapes the individual. Tangible matter is also responsible for the continuity of species. In the case of spontaneous generation, that particular bulk of matter out of which the individual appears is not prepared according to the species, as Bacon puts it, which means in Aristotelian terms, it does not contain the embryo in potentiality. Nevertheless, in this case, also the qualities of that matter are what decides which type of individual can be produced. However, even if matter has the same role in the production of the new individual, it is still the case that it is the spirit what shapes matter and is in charge of its vital functions, so producing the individual and keeping it alive for a period of time. In what follows, I will start by introducing a few basic concepts for Bacon's metaphysics, which play a significant role for his biological ideas, such as spirit, tangible matter, inanimate or non-living and living beings, also appetites and other things we've been talking about these days. Then I will proceed to analyzing the two different types of generation from the point of view of the causal knowledge to see if and where the differences between spontaneous and out-of-seed generations arise. From the tangible matter, the spirit, the seed, or the matrix in which the individual develops. In the fourth section, I will discuss the processes leading to the production of life and the exact role of spiritual matter, which will make it clear why the rejection of substantial forms in the generation of individual makes spontaneous generation not distinct from the generation out of seed. So, Bacon's metaphysics. Bacon distinguishes matter into tangible and pneumatic. The first is gross and inactive, while the second is subtle and active. The pneumatic matter is the source of all visible processes because it is the causal agency within matter. Pneumatic matter can be found by itself, but tangible always has an attached pneumatic in it. Besides the first distinction, there is a second one between families of things, mercury and sulfur, an influence of Paracelsian ideas in Bacon. The mercury family is crude and non-concocted, while the sulfur, sorry, there is a mistake there, while the sulfur family is concocted or digested. Both tangible and pneumatics have mercurial and sulfurous counterparts. Tangibles in Earth are mercury and sulfur, the metals. On the surface of the Earth, watery and oily substances. And pneumatics are on the surface of the Earth, air and flame, and in the skies, ether and sidereal fire. You have the table here, which makes it a bit easier to follow. All these have intermediates, and these are, you can see in the table, salts, juices of plants and animals, free and attached spirits, and the skies of fixed stars. Individual bodies, and we find them on the surface of the Earth, are composed of tangible and pneumatic intermediates, more precisely salts and juices of plants and animals and attached spirits. So the first two that you see in the intermediates must necessarily contain some pneumatic in them. But the pneumatics can be free in the world, as we can see air and fire that are, of course, without any tangible matter attached. And then in the heavens is the same. There is a hierarchy of individuals according to Bacon. Bodies can be inanimate, metals and stone, and animate. The animates being again differentiated into non-living, plants, and living animals, including humans. As we advance on the scale of being, they become more complex and their organs capable of more functions. These distinctions are based on the organization of spirits inside the given bodies. Shortly, inanimate beings' spirits are cut off and not inflamed and kindled, while in the animate they are continued with themselves and branch in veins and canals and kindled and inflamed. Further, in living bodies, besides being branched, spirits also have a cell, and they hold more flame than spirits of plants do. So the cell is the head. And from these two main distinctions, secondary one follows. They are not so important for this talk. In different works, especially in the Vis Mortis and the Historia Vitae et Mortis, Bacon makes a distinction between different types of spirits, mortuales and vitalis. Mortuales saying for the cut off spirits, so those that are found in inanimate beings, and vitalis for the connected ones, those that are found in animate beings, both living and non-living, so plants and animals. Bacon considers that animate bodies contain both types of spirits. Besides the principal spirit, the super-added vital spirit, so the continuous one, there are also other spirits, mortuales, outspread in the parts of the body, having the characteristics of those found in inanimate beings. Nevertheless, except for mentioning their particular functions and how each affect the processes through which a body passes, Bacon does not explain what is the relation between them, if they interact or not, and how it is possible that they are attached to the same body without mingling one with another. I will return to this discussion about the two types of spirits in the last section, because it will shed some light in the analysis of spontaneous generation. But for the moment, I will turn to the causal knowledge in the process of vivification. Throughout his works, Bacon claims that Aristotle was right. He does say that. Concerning the significance of causal knowledge. To truly know, Bacon says, is to know by causes. However, for Bacon, there are only three causes, which should be used in natural philosophy: material, efficient, and formal, while the final cause should be part of theology and not of natural inquiry. So how can we analyze the process of vivification from the point of view of causal knowledge? We recall that there are four things needed for vivification: spirit, heat, tangible matter, and the matrix. The material cause would be the matter, also called mensum, out of which the given being is produced. And this can be contained in the seed in the case of vegetables or in the womb of the female. The formal cause are the motions which figurate the tangible matter, and as Bacon says, they are the work of spirits. The efficient cause is the heat, which seems to have as a source the sun for plants or the heat of the womb for animals. Sometimes Bacon says it might be in the sperm, so it's not entirely clear which is the source. The matrix, representing the place where the process is occurring, seems to play an important role too. Heat does dilate the spirit, it activates its configuring motions, but it is the matrix that keeps it in, and once the new creature takes shape, it provides a continuous heat and nourishment until the individual can nourish itself. In an experiment from the Silva Silvarum, Bacon mentions the differences between the two types of generation. Though they have the same main causes as discussed above, so the four principal things that I said, there are some differences. The creatures with a definite shape, which Bacon also calls perfect, specific, or figurate, cannot be produced by, and I quote, a weak and casual heat, nor out of matter which is not exactly prepared according to the species, end of quotation. And moreover, the time needed for the vivification of perfect creatures is longer. If there is not enough time, then, I quote, the spirit will exhale before the creature be mature, except it being closed in a place where it may have continuance of the heat, access of some nourishment to contain it, and closeness that may keep it from exhaling. And such places are the wombs and matrices of the females. Reading Bacon's differences in the framework of the three causes discussed above, it results that the differences are in the heat, which Bacon assumes it cannot be weak and casual in order to produce a complex individual, because this needs a series of more sophisticated motions for its organ to be produced. In the matrix, only the womb or the seed can provide the environment for a perfect individual to grow. And in the case of spontaneous generation, there is no matrix, and thus the individual resulting has to be very simple and without complex organs. And three, in the matter itself. Bacon says it has to be prepared according to the species. And I will develop a bit more these three things. First, there is a need of more intensity in the efficient cause for those being produced out of seed. The spirit itself has the capacity to shape a new individual, but unless it is excited to set in motion by the kind right of heat, the process will not begin. Differently put, its appetite has to be activated in a stronger way. Second, the matrix provides heat, nourishment, and closeness. This is responsible for what Bacon considers to be the main difference between beings produced out of putrefaction and of a seed, the length of time in which the individual develops, which allows for its complex organs to have enough time to be produced. While in the spontaneous generation, this happens immediately, or of course spontaneous, this is why it's called like that, and only a very simple being can be produced. Because in spontaneous generation, the matrix is lacking, once a being is produced, it also constitutes a final product. As we can see in the fact that Bacon considers that insects bred out of putrefaction have the body made out of an indistinguishable liquid. So they do not have proper organs because they lack the time to develop. Mm-hmm. However, even if they are not produced out of, thirdly, material cause plays a significant role in the generation of new individuals. Bacon's affirmation that matter has to be prepared according to the species clarifies not only why beings produced out of a seed are more complex, but what is Bacon's theory of a continuation of species. This idea of the matter prepared for the new individual is of an Aristotelian origin. In the generation of animals, Aristotle states that the parts of the embryo already exist in matter potentially. And I do quote Aristotle because Bacon mentioned generation of animals in his works. So it's clear he did look at this work, because otherwise it's not clear whether he read Aristotle or just commentaries. But in this case, it's clear he did read the generation of animals. Of course, for Aristotle, it is the form that organizes the material into an organism of a specific kind, in the same way in which the spirits, through their emotions, shape the already prepared organs of the new being. However, if they are not produced out of this matter prepared according to the species, beings produced through spontaneous generation grow in the earth or on another plants or on putrefied animals. Bacon mentions several times that the place where they grow is relevant for determining the species to which they will belong. In fact, several experiments from the Silva Silvarum are designed to investigate the relationship between types of earth or any other substances that can produce life and the species that grow in it without a seed. Moss, for instance, is a rudiment of plants, which means it is inferior to other plants which are bred of putrefaction and which are more specific and figured. Moss appears when earth does not have enough moisture to put forth a plant, and thus do produce germination by putting forth moss. However, in general, moss appears on earth or on trees, and other imperfect plants can grow up on trees or on water or on earth. But when it comes to perfect plants produced without seed, earth is the only one that can produce them. And the only exception is the mistletoe, which can also grow on trees. But the idea that I want to emphasize here is that there is a hierarchy of beings produced without a seed, and this depends on the substance in or upon which the plant grows. The preeminence of the location of the enclosure and the material that becomes enclosed for the production of species was already present in Aristotle, as Lennox emphasizes. The vital heat for Aristotle, Lennox explained, is not derived from anything one in form with the species member, so there is no description of the course of process that identifies this as for the production of a specific kind of organism. In the case of both plants and animals, the external circumstances are determining the form of the new individual. The same is the case for Bacon. For both spontaneous generation and generation out of seed, for both types of generation, and this can be seen in the transmutation of species, which is done by changing the external conditions. The preparation according to the species, so what happens in matter, as I said, that binding, limits matter to produce that species and nothing else. Spontaneous generation, because it lacks this type of bindings, constitutes for Bacon the very proof that species can be transmuted. And there is a quotation from Silva again. We see that in living creatures coming out of putrefaction, there is much transmutation of one into another, as caterpillars turn into flies, etc. And it should seem probable that whatever creature having life is generated without seed, that creature will change out of one species into another, for it is the seed and the nature of it which locks and bounds in the creature that is not expatiate. So as we may well conclude that seeing the earth of itself puts forth plants without seed, therefore plants may well have a transmigration of species. Many of the experiments presented by Bacon in the section of transmutation of species are concerned with changing the external conditions to make plants transmute from one species to another. In most of these cases, the change affects the material cause, which overcomes the motion of spirits and creates a new plant than the one that the seed was prepared to create. The transmutation of species is connected to another significant issue for Bacon's philosophy, namely pretergenerations, which are monsters and prodigies. Sylvia mentioned them yesterday. Bacon says that many of the animals born from spontaneous generation are monsters and prodigies, and this is because of the particular quality of their matter. This could be understood in the sense that if matter transmutes from one species to another, it means that matter goes out of its usual course, and this is exactly what happens in monsters, which are deviating instances. I would like to emphasize here what I consider to be one of the main characteristics of Bacon's comparison between the two types of generations. While Bacon establishes that there are differences in the material and the efficient cause, and another one related to the matrix, however, as I see, this deals more with the development of the individual once it is shaped, in the sense that the organs and fluids of the body are still confused in the generation that was spontaneous, while in the matrix, the spirit separates them into individual fluids. So it doesn't have that much to do with vivification, but with what happened immediately after. He does not mention any difference in what concerns the spirit. We know that it has to be put in motion by a strong heat in order to be able to shape a more complex individual, but is there another difference in what concerns its nature and qualities? I will offer an answer to this question by looking at the series of processes leading to the creation of a new life. And this is part 4. The definition of generation from the Abecedarium Novum Naturae does not even mention the spirit. It says generation is propagation from seed or from a menstruum or gathering of matter, which may be equivalent to seed, things from which a specific body, if gradually formed by a series of simple motions. However, we know that generation for Bacon cannot take place without a previous putrefaction. In other words, in order to have a new individual, the old one has to be destroyed, even if that means that, simply put, the seed disappears in order for the new plant to appear. Putrefaction is defined by Bacon, again in the Abecedarium, as a rudiment of generation or the superinduction of a new form, and some of various simple motions which belong in part to the dissolution of an old nature and in part to the certain tentative efforts of a new nature. Both generation and putrefaction are in fact the work of spirits, even if Bacon does not mention this in the Abecedarium. In his desire to leave the body, the spirit sometimes finds channels to go out, but a part of it remains inside and continues to move. Bacon suggests that every movement is confused or chaotically initially. And if the motion becomes ordered, then putrefaction transforms into generation. If it continues confused, then the body decays and in the end it will disappear. And there is here a long quotation from Silva, which I will read quickly. Putrefaction is the work of the spirits of bodies whichever are unquiet to get forth and congregate with the air and to enjoy sunbeams. The getting forth or spreading the spirits have 5 different operations. If the spirits be detained within the body and move violently, there follows colocation, as in metals. If more mildly, there follows digestion or maturation, as in drinks and fruits. If the spirits be not merely detained but protrude a little, and the motion be confused and inordinate, there follows putrefaction, whichever dissolves the consistence of the body into much inequality, as in flesh, there's a typo, rotten fruits, shining wood, etc., and also in the rust of metals. But if that motion be in certain order, there follows vivification and figuration, as both in living creatures bred of putrefaction and in living creatures perfect. But if the spirits issue out of the body, there follows desiccation, induration, consumptions, and as in bricks, evaporation of liquid, etc. The desire of spirits to leave the body is one of the 4 fundamental appetites of matter, the appetite to better their conditions. We've been just talking about appetites. Better mentions that this appetite is always active unless another one is activated. This is to say, on the one hand, that this one is the weakest because the other will prevail if there is another one in the same body. And on the other hand, that this is the dormant appetite active when others are not. Also very important is that the same appetite will produce completely different effects depending the matter on which the spirits move. If we look back at the processes leading to a new individual, we can notice that in their desire to leave the body, the spirits start to move. This motion, which is confused in the beginning, destroys the previous form, the seed or equivalent gathering of matter, as Bacon says. Then it becomes order and creates a new individual by shaping its parts. And that's the moment when this process transforms into vivification. But because there is such a big difference between the old and the new form in the case of vivification, the process can also be called concoction. There are more types of concoction for Bacon, and they might bring some light up on the issue of generation. The first distinction is between assimilation and maturation. The second is the maturation quoted above in the quotation, and it happens when fruits or drinks are ripened or get settled. This does not constitute thus a change of form, but only of a few characteristics. Like in the case of fruit, they become sweeter. Assimilation, on the other hand, is a more thorough transformation. And there is again a distinction. It can be proper assimilation when food is transformed into the body of the individual who eats it, or transmutation, proper transmutation, as in metals. The difference between the two is that in the first case, the second form was already there. And this is a transformation by imitation, as in the case when fruits transforms into the body that consumes it. So, of course, flesh was already there. We eat bread, bread becomes flesh. But in the second case, the new body is something completely new, like silver that becomes gold. The gold hasn't been there before. Bacon goes deeper than this in another instance where he analyzes not only the relation between the two forms, the first and the second, but also the transformations at the level of tangible matter. And in order to explain this type of transformation, I return to the above mentioned discussion on the Paracelsian principles and sulfur and mercury. The transformation of water into oily substance, so mercurial transforming into sulfurial, is, according to Bacon, one of the greatest activities of nature. It takes place in 4 instances: generation without seed, assimilation of nourishment, inception of putrefaction in water, and dracylation of metals. I will focus only on the first 2. Oil is digested water, and this transformation takes place first in the mixture of earth and water, which, mingled by the help of the sun, gather a nitrous fatness, more than either of them have severally, as we see in that they put forth plants which need both juices. And second, in the assimilation of nourishment made in the body of plants and living creatures, whereof plants turn the juice of mere water and earth into a great deal of oily matter. Living creature, though much of their fat and flesh are out of oily elements, as bread and meat, yet they do assimilate also in the measure they drink. This distinction is very telling about Bacon's account of generation and of different types of generations. As in the case of assimilation, where it is true that the body transforms the food into its own material, but here there is also a distinction between the types of the substance that is assimilated. If it's water, it needs concoction. If it's this kind of concoction of mercurial to sulfurial. If it's flesh, for example, or bread, this is already concocted. So it's only that kind of assimilation in which changes the substance but does not need concoction. And the same type of the same difference, we also have it when we talk about generation. So spontaneous generation can take place when the matter used is already oily, as when beings produced out of spontaneous generation grow on the body of another plant or putrefied plants and animals. So they use the matter of those as their own matter. Or when it is watery and thus a previous concoction is required before the proper generation. And this is exactly Bacon's example of mixture of earth and water which have to become concocted. This idea is not original either for Bacon, and as well as above, it can be traced back to Aristotle. In The Generation of Animals, Aristotle states that, I quote, "Nothing comes into being by putrefying, but by concocting. Putrefaction and the thing putrefied is only a residue of that which is concocted." It is true, though, that Bacon insists on the existence of putrefaction before vivification, but it is because he wants to define the process through which the old form is destroyed. While Aristotle, by affirming that the putrefied thing is the residue, still mentions putrefaction, but does not put the accent on it. Put it differently, Aristotle does not agree that putrefaction itself has a contribution to the creation of a new form of life, though he admits the process takes place. Otherwise, the old form could not create place for the new one, while Bacon is willing to emphasize the exact sequence of processes leading to the creation of the new life, and thus he has to highlight the stages of putrefaction, which constitute the very beginning of vivification. But where is the spirit in all these processes? Because I already said, well, Bacon considers they are all produced by emotion of spirit. From Bacon's affirmation, we understand that the motion mentioned in these processes is caused by the attempt of spirits to satisfy their appetites. In the case of putrefaction, we can assume that it is the spirits existing in the body which started to decay. So we have a putrefying animal and we will have worms on it. Well, there were spirits in that animal and they started to leave the body. And they found the right kind of matter in order to become another being. But the question is which kind of spirits, because I already mentioned in section 1 that there are two types of spirits in individual bodies, non-living and vital spirits. So which of these are involved in the process of creation of life? We recall that for Bacon, there are two main differences between spirits. Vital spirits are more concocted, and they are also more more connected and inflamed than the non-living ones, the latter being closer to the earth, so they are not inflamed. My claim is that Bacon seems to suggest that the spirits are of one kind, and depending on their organization, they attain different qualities. This means that when they are cut off, they are not very inflamed, but once they are continuous, they become more inflamed. And then even more inflamed when they have a cell. Graham suggested that ascent to the chain of being is marked, that this chain of being is marked by increasing quality of and inflammation of the vital spirit. Though quality seems to be important, I consider more important the capacity to become connected and the resulting structure of the connected spirit. If this is so, then the matter in which the spirit is enclosed plays a crucial role because it must be such as to permit a certain organization. Put it differently, spirits are all vital in potency, but their vitality is activated only when they are enclosed in the right kind of matter, which allows its continuity and the existence of what Bacon calls the main seats of the head. Then they become inflamed and able to perform their vital functions. This is also evident from the fact that in the seed we do not have a vital spirit in the proper sense, since the body in which it is enclosed does not have vital functions. But this spirit is vital in potency once the seed starts to develop into a new individual. And in the same way, spirits from putrefied animals or plants can become vital spirits of a new being once they find the right viscous and tenacious matter, because these are the two qualities of matter in order for generation to take place. It seems thus that there is no fundamental distinction between generation out of seed and spontaneous generation, since the spirit that shapes the individual is non-living and it becomes vital while it shapes matter and becomes continuous. But there is one issue that can bring problems to Bacon's theory. As already mentioned, the spirit of animated beings should also be an intermediate of fire and air. You remember the table. And the difficulty in this case is that fire and air do not easily mingle, except for in the case of the spirits and the gunpowder. And in the second case, it lasts for one moment because the gunpowder explodes. This shows that this combination of airy and fiery matter has a very, it's very strong. In gunpowder, it explodes immediately. In the case of the spirits of vegetables and animals, the explosion does not take place, but the same kind of force is responsible for the fact that a small quantity of spirits is capable to move such a big mass of tangible matter. And the explosion does not take place because tangible matter prevents it and keeps the flame and air together within itself. If this is so, and air and flame do not mingle unless there is tangible matter around them to fix this union, then we can easily ask, how does it happen in the case of spontaneous generation? If for the generation out of seed, we can assume that the airy flamey spirit is already there, and also in the case of putrefaction, in some of them, where there is a spirit, it is not clear at all how air and flame unite before becoming the spirit of those beings produced in earth and water. Even if Bacon does not answer this issue, there is another significant feature of his philosophy which results from this. Though we might expect Bacon's conception to be closer to the vitalist philosophers, he is again closer to Aristotle, in fact. If for Ficino, for instance, there were spirits spread around the world infusing all beings, which were part of the vital spirits, and which could also easily enter in union with tangible matter to produce new individuals, this seems less probable for Bacon because, as mentioned, pneumatics are not spirits composed of air and water, and of air and fire, sorry. In this respect, Bacon is closer to the Aristotelian critics of Ficino, such as Licetti, who did not agree that there are spirits, that free spirits are in the environment, and Bacon is also very clear about this one. And this is a part of the paper that I should develop a bit of a comparison with Licetti. We have thus, in the case of spontaneous generation, two different situations. One in which there are two processes that have to take place, the concoction of tangible matter and the union of airy and fiery pneumatics, as in the case of generation in the earth and water. The other in which the matter is already concocted and the spirit already pre-exists, as it happens when new plants appear in the body of another plant or animals in the body of other animals. The first one seems more complicated to take place and requires a series of other processes before, as concoction, for example, for tangible matter, but it's not clear what it requires for pneumatic matter to unite. Conclusion. In the generation of animals, Aristotle says that spontaneous generation takes place because, I quote, there is water in earth and air in water, and in all air is vital heat, so that in a sense all things are full of soul. Therefore, living things form quickly whenever this air and vital heat are enclosed in anything. When they are so enclosed, the corporeal liquids being heated, there arises, as it were, a frothy bubble. Whether that is forming is to be more or less honorable in kind depends on the embracing of the vital principle. This again depends on the medium in which the generation takes place and the material which is included. We can recognize in this quotation all the elements mentioned also by Bacon: spirit, heat, medium or matrix, and matter. I have been emphasizing during the discussion on Bacon's conception of spontaneous generation the Aristotelian components. I'm not willing to claim that Bacon was an Aristotelian himself. That would be impossible. And he's very clearly in criticizing Aristotle, his methodology, but also his ideas in natural philosophy. But however, this article shows that Aristotelian writings on natural philosophy were not entirely rejected by Bacon, and some of his ideas are found discussed, and Bacon makes use of them in his own historical writings. Out of the four elements needed for generation of a new being, I showed that heat has to be more forcefully to produce a complex being, and thus a moderate one cannot be produced for spontaneous generation. And thus a moderate one can be used for spontaneous. As for the matrix, its absence is what makes spontaneous generation being spontaneous. Its role is to keep the new individual inside until it is fully developed. The result is that the beings produced out of spontaneous generation are imperfect and have short lives. And as well as for Aristotle, fact emphasized by Cardano, one of Bacon's main sources, Bacon offers a preeminent role to the material cause of generation in both the spontaneous cases and the ones through seed. The continuity of species is assured by the type of matter being prepared for the species. And in the case of spontaneous generation, matter also has to be such as to support the creation of the individual of a certain species. Some of Bacon's experiments in Silva Silvarum were designed to study precisely this relation. However, one of the main issues was connected with the spirit. For Aristotle, the pneuma, so the air that he mentions in the quotation I just read, functions as a soul to those beings generated spontaneously. But it seems differently still from the form transmitted through seed. For Bacon, this seems to be less of a problem for two reasons. One is that the vital spirit takes some of the functions held by the Aristotelian form, and the second, that any spirit can become vital if it finds the right, another typo, matter in which it can connect and be inflamed. Generation seems thus identical in both cases. A non-living spirit becomes vital in the right kind of matter and creates a living being. continuing to take care of all its vital functions. The only difference is that in one case, the spirit is contained in the seed, but in other, it comes from the environment. The Baconian theory, though, has another problem, and this has to do with the proper nature of the spirit, namely the union of airy and fiery nature. If spirits are never free, then Bacon should give an account of how they unite in the case of spontaneous generation, which he does not. Here, as well as in other situations, Bacon leaves open questions to be answered by his followers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doina. We've got like about 15 minutes for questions or comments. Anyone?
There's one figure. This is very, very interesting stuff. Thank you very much. But there's one figure I'm wondering if you think might also be linked to Bacon, and that's Lucretius. Because in so many ways, well, I mean, you mentioned Aristotle, but Lucretius's account of spontaneous generation. Well, for Lucretius, of course, animals and plants arise directly from the earth by purely material processes, without there being any souls, of course. There are no substantial forms. It's all about atoms interacting with one another. And he talks about, if I remember in the De Rerum Natura, he talks about womb-like structures being formed in the earth, which give you the conditions similar to the way wombs in animals later will work.
Yeah.
You know, for the materials to come together and to produce animals. He talks about pre-generation as well. And I'm wondering, and it seems to be given certainly the wide availability of Lucretius, the fact that it was widely read.
Yeah, no.
This might also be a source.
Yeah, Bacon definitely read Lucretius. I didn't look at it, and I should, so thank you very much. On one thing, things like matrices being produced in the earth, that would not be something Bacon agrees with, because that's the main difference between spontaneous generation and generation out of seed. There is no matrix.
But you still need an enclosed space of some sort.
No, you don't, because it's spontaneous. It has one moment. It is a bit problematic because, okay, then how does it happen exactly? There should be a bulk of matter. How does that one have limits? Why that bulk of matter and not the one next to it? Yeah, it is problematic.
But even so, even if he disagrees with Lucretius at that point, question you might ask is he reading Lucretius and saying, no, it doesn't happen like that? Or what?
Yeah, okay, yeah, this is a good point, and I will look at it. Thank you. Yeah.
Me gustó muchísimo tu trabajo.
Gracias.
En verdad era digamos, un aspecto de Bacon que, bueno, jamás me he puesto a conocerlo suficientemente. Pero te quería preguntar sobre la jerarquía de la producción de las especies, porque dices que hay una especie de jerarquía en vista de que si cambian las condiciones externas, pueden también cambiar las especies de la generación espontánea. De manera, digamos, que hay una especie como de transmigración, dices tú, de las especies. Y yo te quería preguntar, bueno, no hay tanta forma de transmigrar si después de todo, y finalmente está sobre todo en la putrefacción, ¿no? En la que se dan estas. Entonces, ¿qué tan variación de las especies o transmigración? Es que parecería no la misma cuestión, ¿no? Si uno podría pensar que en la putrefacción se pueden dar diversas especies, pero tanto como en qué sentido transmigran. Esto es algo que...
Bueno, son dos cosas, digamos. si es putrefacción y si es generación espontánea, entonces simplemente pasa una transformación allá que normalmente no ocurre y por eso es transmutation. En el caso de las especies es un poquito más complicado, pero creo que también tiene mucho que ver con la putrefacción, porque Bacon considera que las especies se pueden cambiar solamente cuando están en la tierra antes de aparecer realmente, porque obviamente una vez que han crecido no se pueden cambiar más. El proceso de cambiar tiene que pasar en la semilla. Así que está coordinado, pero es importante que él considera la generación espontánea como el modelo y la justificación para decir la transmigración de especies es posible.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. I have two questions.
Only.
The first one is about matter theory, again.
Of course.
And so permanent cognition. So it's very interesting the way you find to explain how no vital spirit is transformed into a vital one, and it seems to be plausible, your suggestion. Now I'm thinking on the whole picture of matter, I mean tangible and spiritual matter. Do you think that we can use this particular explanation to interpret that there is a possibility of transformation? I mean, matter is just one, and it can be tangible and spiritual, so vital, spiritual, and non-vital, spiritual too. How do you?
Yeah, sometimes I'm trying to write a paper on this, but I never manage to. Yes, I do consider matter is always a continuum. So you have it tangible, then you have the airy matter, then you have the flame, the flamey one, and you do have transformations. And in the same way, you do have in the composed one, one that is less fiery but can become more fiery. I think there are always transformations at the level of matter, and yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, one point. In that case, spiritual matter wouldn't be the dominant one. That's my point, because in some interpretation we have, I think, it seems to be that tangible matter is more passive, so to say, and that the very changes depend on what spiritual matter does. And then the point would be that in this case, the transformation of spirits from non-vital to vital will depend on other kind of matter, not necessarily spiritual, to be tangible. I don't know.
Yeah, so on the one hand, it does depend on the tangible, because if it doesn't find the right enclosure, will not become. On the other hand, it is the pneumatics in general that are very active, so I'm not really sure what Bacon would say. It might also be that indeed there is tangible matter that could never transform into pneumatic, and probably the other way around also, and that I think that has a lot to do with Bacon cosmology and with the fact that you do need the mass of tangible matter to be in the center of the universe. And I guess it will never transform completely into pneumatic. Though, given the appetites, it looks like Bacon suggests that matter has a tendency to become pneumatic. All of it, or most of it, kind of a stoic end of the earth, of the world with the flame. So probably if appetites are always activated and the appetite of multiplication would always be active, there would be more transformation, but probably still not complete. Or I don't think we can give a very final answer to this.
And if I have time, another one. The other one is about the predator generations. and it's interesting how in this quotation, page, I don't remember where is it, but there is a long quotation of putrefaction, and there are several options that can occur. Sometimes when the motion is disordered, there is one result possible, and when there is a certain order, is another result. And it depends just on appetites again?
No, I think that, no, that was exactly the point that I was trying to make. It depends on matter again. So the appetite is the same, is the appetite of the spirit to get out of the body, and then it only depends on the quality of matter, which of the 5 processes takes place. So in the case of putrefaction and vivification, if matter is not viscous and tenacious, these are the 2 qualities mentioned in vivification, then it will be simple putrefaction and it will never lead to generation. But if those 2 qualities of tangible matter are there, then the process can transform.
Thank you.
Last one question.
Junto con la teoría de Aristóteles, ¿has considerado también el neuma de los estoicos aquí? O sea, ¿puede haber ahí una especie de mezcla entre estas 2 tesis?
¿En la generación espontánea o en general?
Bueno, en general.
En general, sí, estoy segura de que la concepción baconiana de espíritus está fundada en los estoicos.
Okay.
Sí.
Oh, thank you very much, Doina.
Thank you.